Good evening and welcome to Forecast Lab. We do have some thunderstorms out there, so you may hear a little bit of thunder as we go through this, but not much to see on the satellite loop. However, we do have some problems with heat in the eastern U.S. and the Central Plains. We'll look at that shortly, but let's take a look at the tropics. Very, very quiet in the Atlantic Basin. We do have one tropical disturbance, not really expecting development on that, but it's already moved very quickly into the Houston area. Let's take a look at the radar. Here we see scattered coverage of thunderstorms all the way from Lake Charles to the Houston area down to Victoria and even to Rockport and Port Aransas. These storms have a rather strong westward motion that indicates, that there is the presence of some sort of disturbance out there in the Gulf. Now, I can't really tell from this exactly where it is. The model-derived streamline analysis does help a little bit, and that indicates a low-pressure area just southeast of Galveston, maybe about 75 to 100 miles offshore. The trend into tonight, gradually, whatever circulation that is, moves inland. Looks like, what is this? Yeah, one little low-pressure area possibly east of Houston. That's going to be about midnight. And then gradually all that ends, a little bit of troughing moving inland, and then we return to that strong onshore flow from the Gulf, which is typical of this time of year. Then looking at the big picture, the surface analysis, a bit of cold air coming into the Midwest and the Great Lakes area, dropping the temperatures into the 80s, down to the south, 90s, all the way from the Ohio River Valley into the New York City area. And as we go further south, we get back into some rain there along the Gulf Coast. Temperatures overall in the 90s. I don't see any hundreds on here, except in the southwestern U.S. and some very warm air all the way up into the Washington interior. And then we make our initial pit stop, starting with the northeastern U.S. Well, this definitely indicates a frontal system. There's one wave right there, another off the left side of the screen, and some storms already clearing the New York City and Boston area. So I'm pretty sure we've got relief already on hand there. But hot weather further to the south around Atlantic City to Washington, D.C. Extreme heat warnings were in effect for a large part of New Jersey earlier today. Those are probably expiring. All of the northeastern corridor under a heat advisory today all the way down into Virginia. 90s expected today with heat indexes into the 100s. And a SPC slight risk for this convective complex stretching from just south of Long Island into Pennsylvania. And we'll check out that surface map. Well, Boston still 88 degrees, 80s behind that convective cloud system. It looks like you got to go further up into the New England area to get into the cooler air. 88 at Albany still. Yeah, so near 70s dew points. Those heat indexes are going to be elevated. But in between, right in here, we do have some outflow air, so a little bit muggy, but certainly cooler. Down to the south, this is where our major heat is, down there in the Washington, D.C. area. Some of that rain cooled as well, but 94 at Dover Air Force Base and 94 at Richmond. And then further to the west, thunderstorms across Ohio. A little bit cooler in the Great Lakes with 80s flowing southward. Extreme heat warnings and watches, however, run all the way through Tuesday in the St. Louis area. They're at 94 over 71 this afternoon. Those extend into western Kentucky. Heat indexes over the next couple of days will be in the mid-110s in some areas. Then we head into the southeastern U.S. It was a hot day. Temperatures approaching 100 in some parts of North Carolina, upper 90s elsewhere. But relief coming in from the south as clusters of storms surge northward along the sea breeze and close to this area of disturbed weather with that tropical disturbance out to the south. Temperatures as we head into the evening still in the mid-90s across Georgia, a little bit cooler down to the south. We've got mid-80s across much of Alabama and Mississippi, so that's some good news. Mid-90s as we head west into Texas, and we get into those 100s west of Fort Worth. Then checking out the satellite loop for the southern plains, there's that tropical disturbance. Let's take a look at the water vapor imagery to see if that circulation shows up a little bit better. And we do see some of the higher precipitable water in this area right here. That appears to correlate fairly well with the GFS precipitable water fields. There's the area of enhanced precipitable water, 2 to 2.5 inch, which is fairly stout even for this time of year. So I'll give you a little tutorial where you can check out how unusual that is. Go to the Weather Prediction Center site, go to Forecast Tools, and go to this Ensemble Situational Awareness table. So typically here I click on the NAEFS right there, and you're going to get this drop-down thing here. I don't know why it's always set on the Western U.S. I always switch that to continental. Then I'm going to go to the percentiles and view the table. I want to see tonight's data, so I'm going to look right here. Under this precipitable water row, you can click on the very top. That'll give you a loop, but we'll be waiting here for a couple minutes. So let's click on that and see where we're at. So this shows you how unusual the precipitable water values are. And this does show that this is a 1 to 2 sigma event. This is up in the 97 to 99th percentile. So this is definitely an unusual amount of moisture. A more typical value this time of year is about 1.5 inch. Elsewhere across the southern plains, we do have some storms all the way from the Big Bend up the Sacramento Mountains into the Sangre de Cristos. Very little in the Continental Divide area. But wow, big wildfire. Well, we're getting out of range. We'll cover that shortly. Let's head up north. In the northern plains, we do have a couple of hot spots for severe weather. I'll go ahead and put those up there. Slight risk for today across North Dakota, probably catching that cell coming out of the Glendive area. And another slight risk. This one has a little bit of enhanced tornado potential. There could be a couple of isolated occurrences. This is along a warm front. You can see the cyclonic rotation in that cloud field right there. So the warm front like that, the low pressure area right there around Salina and Topeka. So this is kind of a slightly augmented area for storm relative helicity. Storms already going up along the Interstate 35 corridor from Emporia up to Kansas City. Looks a little bit disorganized and maybe a little bit outflowish. Don't see any warnings right now, but of course, if you're in that area, you want to monitor and make sure that there's no surprises. Further up north, looks like another good day there for the Oshkosh Air Show, which is ending this weekend. I did take a look at the forecast models, and I didn't really see any problems through this weekend, so we'll just kind of leave it at that. On the Front Range, some storms all the way down from Scottsbluff to Denver, maybe a little bit to the west of there and down, mostly in the mountains at this hour. And we take a look at the wildfire plots. That appears to be the Dragon Bravo fire, still going on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And there it is on the satellite loop. Pretty good plume of smoke there going into southern Utah. We do have red flag warnings Saturday across central and southern Utah into western Colorado. There will be strong southwest winds gusting to 30 miles an hour. Relative humidity is down to 7%. For the deserts, they are heating back up after a cool start to the week. 108 at Phoenix, 106 at Yuma. Cool in the San Joaquin Valley, 80s for the most part. Thunderstorms along the central Sierras up into the Shasta region. They do have a marginal risk for severe, mostly due to strong downburst winds. Then for the northwestern U.S., not really much to talk about. Mild along the Interstate 5 corridor, 71 for a high at Seattle, 78 at Portland, and quite warm in the interior. 90 at Yakima with 91 at Pendleton, 94 at Boise, and 94 at Salt Lake City. And we head out into the Pacific. There is cold advection along the northwest coast right there. bringing in slightly cooler maritime polar air into the Pacific Northwest. There's another storm system lined up around the Anchorage area. Some very warm air in the interior. Look at it, mid-70s around Fairbanks. A very cool Arctic Ocean high up there near Barrow and the North Slope, bringing in those northerly winds into that part of the state. And in Canada, not much going on. The main story, however, lots of smoke all the way from northeastern Alberta into Saskatchewan and central Manitoba. And some filaments of smoke making it all the way down into Quebec. Quebec City is under an air quality advisory today for wildfire smoke. Elsewhere, severe thunderstorm watches today across southern Manitoba, including Winnipeg, and in southern Alberta, including Calgary, both of those areas, calling for large hail and high winds this afternoon. And this is the part of the program where we start looking at what's coming our way and what the future holds. Good place to start, even during the summer, is with the 500 millibar chart. This is a mid-troposphere chart up at about 18,000 feet or about 3 miles up. And this is showing us a subtropical high centered across the southeastern U.S., the influence of that extending into the Midwest and the northeastern U.S. So pretty much everywhere up to this 588 line, seeing above average temperatures. Progressive flow from the North Pacific across Canada into the Maritimes, and a trough coming onshore across the Pacific Northwest that's associated with cold advection. Cold advection always lowers the upper level heights. Little tidbit for you there. As we go into the weekend, let's see what's going on. This subtropical high stands its ground, ridging into Minnesota and Iowa. More of that progressive pattern up north, and that trough here just kind of washes out and becomes kind of blended with that long wave trough offshore. Little cutoff, well, no, is that a cutoff flow? No, it's probably, that's probably a split flow pattern. I'm not going to call that cutoff until it's like well south of the prevailing flow. So as we go into the remainder of the period, the seclusion drifting around up there in the North Pacific, and this would probably be a little cutoff low, little vortex moving across California next week. Big old ridge continues across the deep south, and some of it extending into the prairies as well. So we're looking for probably some warm temperatures for central Canada coming up here. Not good news for wildfires. As we go into not this weekend, but the next one, August 2nd, look at that, August already coming within range. We see ridging across Texas, so that spells very hot for Dallas, very hot for Houston, Little Rock, Memphis, a little bit more variable up to the north, but this ridging here, this probably indicates some very hot temperatures at least, and just kind of a stagnant weather pattern all the way through the end. Let's take a look at the monsoon patterns. Dry in Arizona. They're getting hosed down by this dry flow coming off those cold currents off of California. But there is still moisture down in Mexico. Not great moisture, but enough to support some higher-based storms in parts of the New Mexico region. As we go into Saturday and Sunday, well, we've still got ridging across the southwestern U.S., still 20s and 30s dew points, but we're going to get some recovery coming up as we go into Wednesday. Big storms out there on the Sierra Madre Occidental. Dew points coming up to near 60 at El Paso and Chihuahua, 66 at Hermosillo, and 50 at Tucson. So Monday is the day we get some of that southeasterly flow starting to pick up and kicking out those westerlies. So by Wednesday, we're back into the monsoon, maybe extending into the Four Corners and Colorado as well. Big old high up there across Oklahoma. That gives us kind of a southeasterly gradient through the southwestern region. And then the extended period, 50s to 60s dew points. A little bit of drying there towards next weekend, and that's going to be the very last frame that I have. Some of this moisture could eventually make it back into California, but we're going to have to check that out next week. Well, I see no reason to prattle on, so let's go ahead and look at that forecast. Starting out with a map for tonight. Some storms up there in the Midwest, Iowa, northern Illinois. Then we go into tomorrow afternoon. There's 7 p.m. Some showers and storms from the southern Great Lakes into the Chicago area. We're going to see a cool down in the northeastern U.S. this weekend, highs in the 80s, but still 90s in Virginia. Good chance of rain all through this area north of that front. In the southeastern U.S., we're looking for some areas in the Carolinas to hit 100, including Columbia and Charlotte. Rainy along the Gulf Coast. More of that sea breeze activity in the south-central U.S. 100s continue in northwest Texas and up to the north. Also 100s breaking out in South Dakota around Pierre and Philip, more specifically right there. A large part of the northwestern high plains in North Dakota, however, will be under a marginal risk for severe weather, mostly due to damaging outflow wind. There could be a couple of isolated occurrences. Then for Sunday, this little weak front moves through the Dakotas, but brings a welcome push of cold air. It's going to probably take a couple of days for that to come through. Remaining cool up there in the northeastern U.S., Pennsylvania, New Jersey, but that front really not pushing south. 100s expand across the Central Plains. We're looking for 104 at McCook, located right here. A large marginal risk across Minnesota near this frontal system. The Oshkosh Air Show will be ending. Looks like fair weather for the most part. They're going to be probably in between rain systems, and the southwestern deserts heating up to the 110s. Then for Monday, a big warm-up returns to the northeastern U.S. 90s appearing once again all the way up the northeast corridor to Boston. The heat wave worsens in the Carolinas, looking at 103 around the Columbia area, 100s from southwest Georgia to Raleigh. The heat wave also worsens in the central plains. We're looking at 100s from Salina to Alliance, Nebraska. That's basically this area right here. Some relief is on the way from the north. Look at those thicknesses up to southern Canada, down to 561 decameters. Monsoon rains picking up on Monday in the mountains of New Mexico and eastern Arizona, so relief there as well. And the picture will get a little bit better in both regions as we go into midweek. Here comes that cool air southwards, 1024 millibar high, dropping the temperatures into the 70s and 80s in the Dakotas. Heat wave continues down south, but it backs off a little bit, but still a corridor of 100s all the way from North Carolina through Macon, Nashville, Memphis, DFW, Salina, all through that area. Monsoon rains increase in New Mexico and Arizona, and this cool air continues to, sag southward. Definitely not bolting southward, just gradually oozing down into the Ohio River Valley, and it should come to a stop right around here. Some cool air into the central plains as well. Kind of stormy up there in Nebraska. And we'll go into the extended. Yeah, it looks like that cold air mass stops right around Little Rock to Atlanta, but the better cool air will be well up to the north. And we go into the extended period into August. This stationary front right there through the southeastern U.S. up to Nebraska. And that's about all I've got right there. This is good news if you're in the Midwest and you like rain. Elsewhere, it really depends where you are in relationship to these boundaries, the sea breezes, and the monsoon. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. Remember, you can support this program by heading to Patreon. Otherwise, head to weathergraphics.com, and I've got some good forecasting books. You'll want to check those out if you haven't seen them already. And a very special thanks to our newest supporters, Andrew Lloyd-Jones, C., and Nicholas Hilfka. Thank you very much for stepping up to the plate and helping to support this program. All right, we'll be back again on Monday for another episode for the supporters, and on Tuesday for everybody else. Hope you have a great weekend. Bye-bye.